Okay, take it away, whoever wants to start. We'll start with, because I see Will on my screen, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. Thanks so much, Kate. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Will Garish, and I'm an admissions counselor at the University of Chicago. And I guess to start with, what we're thinking about, because I think all of us being highly selective schools are going to have a sense of fit for our institutions, something that is right for us in particular, not just being a fantastic student and well-rounded and having great, extracurriculars and all the amazing things that I'm sure you do. But when you're dealing with, sub 20% admit rates, you're getting a lot more academically and extracurricularly and otherwise qualified applicants than you're going to have space to admit. So certainly don't want to speak for all of us here, but I think we all certainly think about fit a lot in our admissions processes. And who's right for U Chicago, who might not be right for Dartmouth or Berkeley or Cornell, even though they're certainly prepared for all of those schools. So what we're thinking about at U Chicago is definitely a really strong sense of independent intellectual curiosity. I always talk to students when they're thinking about, writing essays for schools or picking schools that are the right fit. Try to understand how that school sees itself, how it kind of views its own ethos and its own sort of particular niche. And honestly, I think if the school does a decent job in their marketing, they will make that pretty obvious in like the first headlines that you see on their websites and in their marketing materials. And if you open up U Chicago's marketing materials, you'll see things like rigorous inquiry, like fearless intellectual exploration. This idea that this is a place where people can approach ideas and conversations and discussions and learning in sort of unique and iconoclastic and individualistic ways. And I honestly think the best sort of functional way to try to understand for yourself if you are a fit for U Chicago, if you like the fit that U Chicago is looking for, is to look at our really bizarre essay prompts. We ask really weird things like find X or where is Waldo really or what advice would a wisdom tooth have? Questions that might make you think, wow, that's fascinating. I want to think about and answer that and explore that question. Or it honestly might make you think, I have no interest in answering that sort of question. That's just not up my alley. That's not the kind of place that I want to be a part of. And that's very okay. I think you should go into this process understanding that there are going to be, great schools that aren't great for you. So I think that's a big thing that we particularly look for is that, excitement about exploring ideas in these unique and untraditional ways. Our dean also, frankly, cares just a lot about kindness. He talks a lot about how he loves nice students, people who are going to be good members of a really intimate residential community where you're living and learning alongside a lot of your peers. So those are some of the things that we look for, but really it's a very, very multifaceted process. And honestly, again, when you're dealing with schools as selective as these, not one that you can fully predict either. There's going to be an element of randomness, there's going to be an element of luck, and I think it's good to understand that and accept that before you go into this whole process as well.
All right, Jula. Oh, no, okay.
Oh.
Kristen, you go. You go.
Sure. Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Blake. I'm Deputy Director of Admissions at Cornell University. And I think Will really set us up nicely with kind of talking a little bit about what all of us are looking for. And fit is a huge piece at every one of our institutions. And so I guess the additional flavor that I'll add is authenticity. When we are looking at your application, we want to read about what you actually are interested in and what you like to do. We often hear from people, and sometimes even in webinars like this, it's like, what do I do to get into your school? How do I get into your school? And the truth is, you be yourself. If you are doing something simply because you think it's what the admissions officer reading your application wants to see, it probably means you're not actually excited about it. And that can come through in your application. There is no, set of criteria that is going to get every student in. A student could look exactly the same in one year and the next year would not be admitted. And there is that piece of luck that Will, talked about as well. And so be true to yourself, be true to your interests. And that can mean doing things in the summer like a part-time job versus trying to self-publish a book or doing research. We want you to be a teenager and do things you enjoy, and you have years and years, to work in labs and to have jobs or internships. And so sometimes it's nice to see you pursuing your passion and what you're excited about and having that exploration early. We don't expect you to know exactly what you want to do with your life at 16. And so be authentic, be true to yourself, and show us who you really are throughout your application.
Go ahead, Jua.
Okay, I was trying to think of the alphabet shift here. So good morning, everybody. My name is Jua Howard, Assistant Director in the Office of Undergrad Admissions at the University of California, Berkeley. And just to kind of add to the conversation, I agree with everything that Will and Kristen both shared. I think all of that goes into play in our thought process when you're thinking about fit. I think one of the things that I think about, the phrase that I always typically tell students is that, and this is very general, I said, I'm always looking for intellectually curious leaders. And I phrase it in that way because that comes in all different forms, based on, to Chris's point, your level of authenticity and really what matters to you. Academically, yes, you need to be able to come to Berkeley and thrive. We all say this for any of our institutions. All of us are going to have rigorous academic programs. So I need to know that you can step foot on our campus and handle our faculty, and really delve in a very substantial way. We do not want you to be there for a semester and be on academic probation there right thereafter. And it's typically not about abilities at all. It's about timing a lot of times. So we want to make sure that you're academically prepared to come onto campus, but also in addition to that, that you're going to contribute to the academic culture of Berkeley. So again, are you going to be involved in research? You may be, involved in some type of thing where you're working with faculty in a way. You may have research that you're already doing that you're going to bring to campus and contribute in that way. And being able to step outside of your comfort zone and really push yourself in some ways. We're really big on kind of challenging the status quo a lot at Berkeley. So we really want you to not be afraid to be creative in a lot of key ways. So that intellectual curiosity is a really big piece to us. And again, and not just in the classroom, just in your day-to-day life on our campus. But that leader part is key. I need to know that you really can come and, again, be a part of our community and contribute in ways that maybe someone else is not going to. And that could be, still academic. It may be you leading a research group on our campus, but it also may be through your being, one of our individuals who volunteers in our basic needs center. And so you're helping people in our community who are food and housing insecure, and you are showing up for them in some ways. You may be a part of our public service center, one of our programs, even coming back to DC for a semester and interning on Capitol Hill, or figuring out, how are you going to be, one of the movers and shakers in that way and really contribute to where this country is headed. You also may be, a leader of, for us also, and can't forget this, we're really big on entrepreneurship. So we have a lot of students who have businesses. And so that may be something where you're bringing your business that you're already working with, maybe with friends now, to Berkeley, but you may be part of one of our mentorship programs to figure out how to find investors. Finding office space, how can you grow and scale your business? So there's so many different ways I always tell students that you can show up on our campus. But to me, one of the biggest things about Berkeley is always about service and activism, and being a part of a community. And I think that's really important to understand, and also understand that we are a large community. We're over 30,000 undergrad students and over 11,000 graduate students. So I also want students to understand what that means for you. And so a big part of that, a word that I always stress to students is it's very important that you are proactive. You should be able to take initiative when you step onto our campus so that you can find the resources that you need. People are there for you. We have multitudes of different ways that we support you, but also not being afraid to step out and find what you need and ask for what you need and lean into all of those of us who are there to help you. And that will really benefit you in a very significant way. And again, being on a large campus, I'm always very realistic with that. I think that's very important to know before you come to Berkeley so that you have a certain mindset to say, I'm ready for this. I know what I've got to do. But it's a very welcoming and very supportive community. So it's not hard to do. It's got to take a little bit of work and not afraid, again, to push yourself a little bit. But I do think those are some things that will benefit you, I think, coming into a community like UC Berkeley.
Awesome. And I will bring up the rear. You're going from the largest institution here, Berkeley, to the smallest. My name is Eric Ahlstrom from Dartmouth College. And I'm going to pull together some threads that my colleagues have already touched on. They've covered a lot of the great content about kind of what we're looking for. And you'll hear holistic admissions talked about a lot, and that phrase means we're looking at everything, yes, but we're also admitting you as a whole person to join our campus. So we care about everything that you do. And when Kristen talks about the activities that you do outside the classroom, we really want the broadest definition of that. If you are spending the summer navigating the roadways of the DMV, bringing younger siblings to swim practice or to ballet or whatever, you might not think that a university cares about that. And you're probably not going to be, a chauffeur when you get to our campus, but you have developed probably a lot of patience. If you're dealing with younger siblings, you have become a dependable member of your family. You've shown responsibility. Those elements of your character are all things you're going to arrive on our campus bringing with you. And again, you as a whole person are going to be on our campus. On most of our schools' calendars, you're going to be in class for maybe 3 or 4 hours a day. And that's certainly important. Please go to class. But we also think about the other 20, 21 hours and who you're going to be during that time. Dartmouth is kind of an extreme version of that. We ask for a peer recommendation as part of your application. We want one of your friends to write about you, to talk about who you're going to be as a roommate, as a lab partner, as a teammate, who you're going to be at 2 a.m, talking to your friends about their life, their perspective, their ideas. Your friends will brag about you in a way that you never would about yourself. And it's a great way to get that 360 view of who you're going to be when you come to our campus. The second piece of it, and because my colleagues have touched on a lot, this is a little bit tangential. We are fortunate to have a lot of students who we would love to have on our campus. We frankly get to the end of our selection process and are desperate to admit usually 3-4 times the number of students we have room for on our campus. They'd have to put a cot in all of our offices. If we admitted everyone we wanted to admit, we'd have to buy, in our case, every single hotel in New Hampshire. And it is not a reflection on you or your worth as an individual, the decision that comes out at the end of it. It is a product of the fact that we do not have as much space on our campus as we wish we had to admit all of the incredible people there are. There are 4,000 universities and colleges in this country, and you're going to be successful because of the opportunities you take advantage of on whatever campus that looks like. Again, you bringing your whole person, your ambition, your motivation, your aspirations to a campus, that campus is lucky to have you more than anything. So I always like to kind of bring that in as well.
Thank you. Did any of you go to the institutions you work for?
I went to Dartmouth though, so.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did. Yeah.
Why did you go to Dartmouth? What'd you study?
I was an English major there. I did an economics minor. It was a creative writing focus in my English major, but I chose Dartmouth because it really felt like, and I guess I was right, that it was the right fit for me. I grew up in New Hampshire too, so it was, somewhat close by and familiar to me. But I really appreciated, like, I don't want to put words in Eric's mouth, but if we were to ask him, like, what do you think is, one of those big kind of ethos pieces of Dartmouth? I feel like it's this really great combination of just like down to earth students connected to nature, connected to each other, caring a lot about community while also being, intelligent and ambitious and engaged. And I really appreciated that balance. Like I remember visiting there and feeling like I could be like truly happy and unstressed in my day-to-day life while also, pursuing ambitious and exciting things. I also loved like the rural setting. I loved the ability to hike and ski and all of the sort of things that come from the nature and the surroundings at Dartmouth. All things that, might not be the right thing for a lot of other people. There are people who want to be in big cities. I obviously work for a school in a big city now, and I love living in a big city now. And so like that's one of those things where if you hate the outdoors, if you hate the cold, maybe Dartmouth wouldn't be the right place for you. Whereas, me applying to colleges, Chicago would not have been the right place for me because I didn't want a big city. I didn't want all of the urban environment and all that stuff that comes with it. So that's, I guess, another piece of advice for looking at colleges is think about how it's going to be a place where you live for 4 years. And like Eric said, you're in class for a mere fraction of that time. A lot of the rest of it, you're going to spend, doing things with your friends and hopefully making lifelong friends and ideally enjoying the 4 years of your life that you're in college, and where you are is going to have a big impact on that.
Thank you. So I mean, I can keep asking questions, but I'm just going to take a minute here. Does anybody want to put a question in the chat? Don't be shy. If a Whitman parent and I happen to find today, oh, what? College webinar? I don't know if the sheet, what? Okay, all right, well, sorry, that was direct message, something. I apologize. I didn't realize that. All right, come on, people. I know you have questions. That's why you're here.
I think while we wait, I'll throw something out as we kind of go forward and just thinking about just the application process. And it's kind of going back to things I think all four of us have discussed. I think in the application process, something I saw this year that I always want to tell students to be very careful about is really that balance between when you're filling out your application, between aspiration and actually concrete proof of what you're actually doing. And I think I had a lot of students, and I tell students is when you're dealing with, let's say, Berkeley, and you're dealing with 126,000 plus applications, you have a lot of applicants who are all doing phenomenal things. But the hard job is we have to then go through that and really pick out, again, the best students who are going to be a great fit for us. And we have to understand, what are you already doing? How are you already showing up in your community? Versus I have a lot of students who say, when I get to Berkeley, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. When I get to Berkeley, this is what I'm going to do. And don't give me a lot of concrete examples of what are you already doing. And that is very, very important so that we already understand how are you already showing up in your current community, whether that's your school community, at home, if you have a job, whatever that may be. But we need to get a sense of, again, that's concrete examples of what you're doing. So I always say with applications, please be very detailed and be very thorough. If you are filling out, extracurriculars, if we're asking for hours per week, how many weeks per year and how many years, please give us numbers. Get into the nitty-gritty. Best assumption, approximate, but give us those numbers. I need to know your impact. Really, what are you doing in this organization? Not so much sometimes, yeah, what it is, but also what are you doing? Have you increased membership? Maybe you revitalize an organization at your school. If it is your business, your organization, you founded that. Why? Tell us that. Those things make a really, really big difference. And leadership, if you're president of something, literally say 9th through 12th grade. I've done this for all 4 years. Those are the things we talk about, bragging about yourself. That is a part of it because it really gives, again, the sense of the weight of, again, your personal contributions and all of the wonderful things that each of you are doing day to day. That's how you brag because it's facts. That's what you're doing. But if you don't give us that information, I cannot assume. So assumption is not your friend in this process. You have to tell us that. And so that's something I always really stress to you all because I know everybody's very different. Everybody's not, as forthcoming with that information sometimes, but that's really important in this process. And when you're dealing with highly selective institutions, understand you have to put that information forth. So concrete examples, what are you currently doing? Be detailed and be thorough. So.
Very good advice. So as an example, right before this Zoom, I had a mom and her son in here, and this student is full IB diploma, straight A's on paper. He's got everything that all four of your institutions is looking for. But, like every parent and student that I meet with, they want to know, is this enough to get in? And the answer is, I never know. I don't ever know, like I am a data person. I pull data. I'm in the process of analyzing all of our 2025 data. Were you IB? Were you AP? Did you do a summer program? Were you on a crew team? All of that stuff I'm taking into consideration. And I still can't necessarily come up with like the magic potion for these kids to get in. I mean, so do I continue to steer them towards these highly selective institutions? I mean, obviously I tell them to have safeties on there as well, but like it's hard. It's hard for me to advise them as to whether or not they should apply, because it's a lot of work to apply to all these schools. What are your thoughts?
I'll be happy to jump in a little bit here. And so I think you touch on some really kind of important things. I don't think the four of us could tell you, looking at your applicant you just met with, if they would be getting into our institutions, because an individual student looked at alone doesn't tell us the information that we need. We're building a class. And that's the important thing to understand. And it's hard because you are an individual applying to a university. And so you're thinking about your application, but we want to step back and we're thinking about creating a community. And so we want students from all 50 states. We want students from rural backgrounds. We want students who have different experiences, because that's what enriches a classroom. We want people with those differing perspectives and backgrounds. And so it's so important to us to look at all of the applications as a whole. And so we see who's qualified, who we think would be a good member, and then we say, how do we make this class together? And that's kind of goes back to a little bit of what I was saying at the beginning of, you might be a student who looks exactly like a student who was admitted last year, but last year that student fit better into the class overall in that composition that we're looking for. So there is no magic thing that you can do. I think the most important piece when you're applying is to have a well-rounded, robust list of schools. When you're looking at highly selectives, if you were applying to 10 schools, it should not be 10 highly selectives. That is just not thoughtful planning, because you have to look at what our acceptance rates are. The vast majority of students who apply to our institutions are not being admitted. And that is just a factual statement. And so making sure that you have a robust list, that every single school you're applying to are one that you're excited about. There are certainly ways that you can think strategically, and all of us have different plans under which you can apply. So if it's early action, or if it's early decision, if it's early decision 2, etc., those can sometimes hedge your bets and allow an institution that is highly selective to know how excited you are, and to possibly increase your admissions odds. But the most important thing, I think, to share on my perspective is that you need to have a well-rounded list, and you need to be excited about every school, and you need to know that where you're admitted does not define who you are as an individual. It is really just what the school needed in that year to put together the class that they need.
Thank you. All right, we do have some questions coming in. When it comes to applications, essays, what is the common thing you always see that makes the student's essay not stand out, or can even be annoying after seeing 1,000 of the same thing?
I'll hop in here, and I'll say, take a little less pressure on yourself. There's going to be an essay written. We've all probably read an essay about most topics. You do not need to solve world hunger or cure cancer in your essay. If you have the answer to those, phenomenal, but that's not what we're expecting. I think that a missed opportunity that I oftentimes see in an essay is forgetting that we're reading it all together. You know, Kristen's going through your application from front to back. Will's going to have just read your extracurricular section when he gets to your essay. So rather than giving us kind of a narrative rundown of the things you've done during your 4 years in high school, tell us something that we're not necessarily going to know otherwise. That could be a piece of information, but it could also be just things about you and your character. Showcase your values, showcase your sense of humor. If you're funny, be funny. If you're not, this is not the time to try. If you're someone who is really serious and thoughtful, be that person. Because there isn't a sense of humor in a transcript. There's no personality in a test score. Your essay is a place, whatever you choose to write about, where you can showcase those other things. So I think that using it as an opportunity to show something else is the best way to approach it. And again, don't feel like you need to fit your entire life into 650 words. I've not seen that done well yet. Focus on something that's a little bit more of a vignette or an example of the things that are important to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, would you say that a student who has been actively involved in extracurricular or community activities since freshman year generally has an advantage over a student who became more involved starting junior year due to earlier family responsibilities, or would you take those circumstances into consideration when evaluating the student?
I'll jump in just to add my 2 cents on this one. We definitely would take into consideration family responsibilities. I know Eric mentioned the holistic admissions process, And really the foundation of that is we use the term context. So really looking at you within the context of where you go to school, what's available to you, your resources, how are you taking advantage of that? But that branches out to also your home life, your family context, your community. Where are you? And so your family life responsibilities, the composition of your family, your day-to-day life, that's very, very important context. If you are working, if you're helping with family responsibilities, we've had students who have worked full-time jobs to help pay rent, taking, their siblings to and from school, helping with homework, helping elders. If you have a multi-generational kind of household and you're helping elders with medication. I've had students, translating documents. That is all extremely important. It is all of high levels of leadership. It's a high level of maturity. Talk about impacting your community. That's your family, that's your home. So that's extremely important. If you are doing all of this stuff at home, you don't have time to be involved in extracurriculars at school. So that is very much something that we take into consideration. But I'm going to go back to what I said in my previous, kind of one of my previous notes, is that we cannot assume, though. You have to tell us that. If you just list extracurriculars activities and I see you're starting in 11th grade and there's no context provided for us, whether that's in a essay, that's maybe in an additional comment box, something to say, hey, this is what was going on in 9th and 10th grade. I had these kind of responsibilities. This is the amount of time I had to spend in this. So this is why I don't have that level of, maybe involved in these types of extracurriculars. I don't know that. So that is even more important when you have that type of circumstance. You got to tell us that. And put it wherever you need to put it, but the bottom line is that you share it with us so that you give us the opportunity to really understand the full picture of your experience. And that is how you advocate for yourself, because we get it. That's life. This is a human process. We totally understand that, but you have to share that with us so that we're able to kind of, again, bridge that gap and understand the full picture of your experience. So again, yes, we definitely take that in consideration. If that is part of your journey, please share it. It is valuable information to who you are as a person. And again, going back to that authenticity term, that is being authentic to your personal journey. So please share that.
Thank you. How large a part do extracurriculars, examples, swim coaching, play a role in the admissions process if there are less leadership positions?
I could hop in on this one. I think you don't have to be, and I might be different from other institutions here, so Jewett, Kristen, and Eric, if you disagree, please hop in. I don't think you have to be too concerned about like having specific leadership positions or having like the right title, so to speak, like being president or captain. It's more, I think, that we're looking for this sense of like responsibility and ownership over the extracurricular to show that it's meaningful to you, that it's something that you care about and are taking part in, because whether it's necessary and important, like a family responsibility, like Eric said, driving around the DMV, dropping siblings off, or whether it's, like something that is genuinely meaningful to you and you're getting as involved as you can because, you want to do that and you have that time. So like I think of something like swim coaching, there might not be like a captain of the swim coaching, team or something like that. You might not have a specific leadership position that you can list from that, but I would think of that at least as like, here's you taking a mentoring role. Here's you getting involved with younger children, helping them, swim, or whether it's your peers too, that you're swim coaching. And so I feel like at least at U Chicago, we're less like getting into this nitty-gritty of specific extracurriculars and specific leadership positions and more just trying to understand what's meaningful to you in your life beyond school and how have you taken ownership and responsibility over that. So again, whether that's, you do the part-time job or you do that research at the NIH or you did cure cancer or you did some amazing internship or you served ice cream at your local ice cream parlor over the summers. Those are all ways that you show us what's an important part of your life. And they're all, I would say, equally valuable as far as they're important to you and therefore important to us learning about you in the admission process.
Thank you. Okay, here's a good one. How much do you factor intended major into admissions? So I do have students that play the game of, well, I'm going to just go in as this, but I really want to major in this, which I always try to steer them away from doing. But they have this idea that if they apply to something different, that they'll be able to slide into the program that's much more competitive later. So talk to us a little bit about your intent, declaring a major versus going in undecided or changing your major after you get there.
I'll let Jua and Kristen in particular talk a little bit about this because they have slightly different processes around this. But as an institution that does not require you to declare your major when you're coming in, you might think you could maybe do some creative listing of what you're interested in there. What I will say, and I'm not going into every application like Nancy drew, but when I'm going in and reading an application and they say that they're interested in a subject area, I don't necessarily expect that student to have already done a ton of research already and have a really deep resume in that area, or be involved in every single activity at their high school associated with that subject. But I am looking for some things that confirm what they're interested in doing and confirm that they have that curiosity. And when I'm going through an application and maybe that academic interest that's listed near the top of the application is really incongruous with the rest of the application, it means that the whole application kind of loses its credibility. And it feels a little less authentic, to the point that we brought up a few times. I've read applications in the DC area for 12 years now, and unfortunately that does happen a good bit. Students are trying to game the system a little bit. They're trying to say that they want to major in classic archaeology, but I can tell that they really want to be an engineer, and that's phenomenal. It is a sign of your character if I'm getting to your application and things aren't lining up. Now that's going to be different at an institution like Dartmouth or Chicago, where you aren't applying to a specific school within the larger university. That gets even more complicated. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues at some larger institutions to talk about that.
Thanks. I think Eric makes some really good comments. I kind of just want to co-sign a lot of what he just said. So at Cornell, it's unique in that you apply to a specific college at Cornell, and your application is reviewed by individuals who only read for that college. And so fit is very important to us because if you're applying to one of the majors in, let's say, the College of Engineering, you're being read with all other students who are applying to engineering. Then within each of those colleges, some of our colleges allow you to apply undeclared, and you can kind of say, I have an interest in this area, but I know it's in the College of Arts and Sciences, for instance. Or you have to say, I want to apply to the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and I want to do communications. And so it's important to read our requirements and know exactly how you're applying and whether or not you're locked into that major, because some of our colleges do. You get into that major and you have to stay in it until you arrive. And then you can go through a secondary application process, but it's not a guarantee. And so for us, that's a huge piece because we want you to be that authentic person. And so if you tell me that you want to apply for entomology and the study of insects, and then you arrive and you're like, I'm actually going to do computer science, we're going to hold you in those entomology classes for a solid year. And that doesn't sound like fun for anyone who has no interest in studying bugs, right? You want to be in that CS coding class. And so we want you to be honest and upfront, not looking at, hey, there's this little niche major, and I think if I declare it, that is my into a place like Cornell. And again, we're going to see that in your application. We're going to see in 9th grade that you were in Girls Who Code, and we're going to see that what classes you're taking, and that you kind of, senior year, you threw on that you are doing some additional biology work. It's not going to make that congruent, that cohesive story throughout your entire application. And it's okay for interest to change. I don't want to mislead you there and make you think that in 9th grade you had to decide and you have to stick with it. But we can kind of see themes throughout, and we can see that pivot. And sometimes even the letters of recommendation will mention your true interest and not what you are portraying to us. And so it is really important to not try to game the system, to be authentic. And it goes back to, I really liked what Eric said here, is it shows your character. Are you being an honest individual? Because that's who we want on our campus. When we invite you to be a member of our class, we're inviting you to be a member of our community. We're thinking about you as a roommate, as someone who is going to, live in my neighborhood. And so we want students who we believe are going to uphold the values of the institution to which you've been admitted.
Thank you. Oops. Okay. How big a role do sports play? If I'm a creative student focused on pursuing creative writing, do I still need to have done a sport? I could probably answer that, but do any of you have a comment about that?
I would say no. I think that goes back to, I think what we said quite a bit about being true to yourself in your personal journey. If you're not an athlete, I don't expect to see that you've been involved in athletics. Hopefully as a creative in your creative writing, I want to learn more about that. Maybe, you've had things that have been published. Maybe you're working, I mean, students who books, maybe student organizations, maybe that's related to a job you have. So it's all about your journey. We're not expecting you to show up in any particular way. So no, definitely not. But bottom line, we always stress with extracurriculars, and this is whatever that looks like, the quality is really of the most importance. And really, showcasing whatever that you're doing to the highest level. Sustained activity is always preferable. And again, and then leadership within that. And I know Will talked about that looking very different as well. But the quality is more so what we're focused on, meaning versus you have to do particular things. So I will say that. Now, on the caveat, I will say to the previous question, let's say, for instance, regarding your major and where you're applying to. For us, I would say, for instance, College of Engineering at Berkeley is extremely competitive. And this is where I will say this is kind of an example of a little nuance in the process. I do want to see students who have been involved in STEM-related activities. That's not the only thing that you're doing. You may be in orchestra and have a part-time job at Chick-fil-A, but you also, I do want to see STEM-related activities, whether you're on a robotics team, you're doing, maybe a research program at University of Maryland, whatever that may be. But I really want to see those STEM-related activities. Same thing for, let's say, our computer science program. So I throw those out as, again, to this process, all of us looking for different things. And that's part of the research to understand what we're seeking. Those type of activities for those particular programs, we do like to see, and it does make you more competitive in our process.
Thank you. All right, I have a question. I want to talk about AI for a minute, because you are highly selective universities, and presumably you're going to let people in who are good writers that don't need to use AI. So I just want each of you to talk a little bit about your thoughts on AI, whether or not it's okay for kids to use it at all when they're, brainstorming their essays or doing their applications, and what you would advise them to steer away from in regard to AI.
Yeah, I'll hop in here. I use AI most days in my job. So, and I think that a lot of us are going to be using AI for the future in our career. So we absolutely are okay with you using that as you're pushing this process. I think the brainstorming thing is a really good way to go about it, particularly going back to those essays that we were talking about. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to bat around ideas with another person, particularly if you're talking about something that's really personal to you, or something that you feel vulnerable maybe sharing with someone, and talking it out with really yourself. You're asking questions and answering them through maybe ChatGPT or something can be a really helpful way of trying to formulate or organize your thoughts. Now, when you complete your application, you're going to check a little box that says, I certify that everything in my application is individual and original work. And we, in the same way that if you were turning in a paper to your English teacher, assume that everything that you're writing is your own individual work. Various institutions will have different policies as to whether or not they're going to run those through different programs, in the same way that different high schools will use things like Turnitin to look at plagiarism, things like that. But I think one thing that you kind of alluded to already was, we do admit students who are strong writers, but it's not necessarily just because they're strong writers. It's because the writing that they send us shows us a lot about them. And we have all probably read essays, more so maybe in the last few years, that perhaps some copy and pasting happened, and it's like chewing on a piece of cardboard. It's not very interesting. And sure, it is technically correct. All of the commas are in the right place. There are no split infinitives. It reads with the subject and the predicate and the noun, but it's not very interesting. And I think for some students, if they're going through so much iterative process with generative AI, to pardon the internal alliteration, why not just start originally to begin with? But I absolutely think that, and all of our campuses, I know for a fact, all 4 of these campuses and many more around the country are going to have that more and more part of their curriculum. And many universities are starting to, and we're looking at ours right now, putting a statement regarding AI use in admissions and kind of giving you some guidelines, because all of us are fortunate to also have great thinkers on our campus and our faculty who can help us kind of build up those ways of thinking and approaching.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I want to just jump in and say that AI is the newest help in college admissions, but none of us are naive enough to think that this is the only time that someone has touched, in particular, an application essay until now. We know that there are well-meaning parents, there are older siblings, there are college coaches, consultants, guidance counselors, English teachers. It is not new for someone else to review an application essay. And so AI is the newest way in which people are getting assistance, but it's not a new phenomenon. And it's okay, I think, if you are using it in an ethical way, and much of what Eric said, I again would co-sign. I think it's a great brainstorming tool. It can be a way to find a different phrasing or a different angle for your topic. But if you just ask it to write you an essay, it is going to give you a soulless, not specific, very general response. I can tell you that the opening line of every one of the Why Cornell essays comes out the same, and I saw it over 100 times. Specifically, it was about curiosity being the compass. And so we know, we can see it a lot of times, and students will sometimes brag on Reddit. Yes, we are all, reading what is happening on A2C and on TikTok and whatnot. Students will say like, oh, well, I got into XYZ university with an essay that was written by AI. And I would say in that case, you got in despite it having been written by AI. They usually are not very strong, we can tell. But if there are kernels of that authenticity or your experience in there, sometimes it can still be a good essay. But we often are very aware of when students are having their essays massaged, or their entire application for that matter, by others.
All right, thank you. Okay, what are the criteria when students are neurodivergent or with, oops, sorry, it just went away, or with IEPs? What are the criteria when students are neurodivergent or with an IEP when they are submitting their applications? I'm assuming they're saying, do their IEPs follow them, or what when they get on campus, what sort of services will they be provided? I think that's what they're asking.
Yeah, that might differ a little bit from institution to institution, but I would assume we all have some sort of like accessibility center at our schools. That's a very common thing on college campuses to have, you think it's usually called student accessibility center, accessibility office, where if you have an IEP or 504 or any sort of like accommodations or just things that you need to help you succeed in the classroom, colleges and institutions across the country are going to be ready for and want to help, continue to give you that support that you've had. So you can always meet, like, again, and just assume this is true at almost any college, that they have an accessibility office where you can meet with somebody sort of either the summer before or during freshman orientation and right as you come onto campus to discuss what those needs for you would be, what those accommodations, whether it's extra time, whether it's a professor, wearing a microphone in the classroom, and making sure that you have those resources and those things that you're used to continue to be able to succeed. And in the admissions process, we're not going to make any sort of judgment on you. If you have one of those plans, if you are neurodivergent, that is not going to be a negative in any way. It's frankly not something you even need to disclose unless you feel you want to in any way, in terms of, explaining maybe some struggles in some certain years of high school or anything like that, maybe before something was diagnosed. But you don't need to worry that it's something that will, make you look like a worse applicant or someone that we're not confident to succeed, as long as you're showing that you still are succeeding, right? And like if you're doing well with the 504, the IEP plan that you have, we'll assume that you can continue to do well with our accommodations at any of our schools.
Okay. How does dual enrollment influence your application? Does that give you any advantage if you've taken advantage of dual enrollment courses in your high school?
I would say it really depends on context. I'm going to use that term quite a bit because it really depends on what is offered at your respective school, and are you maximizing it? I think a lot of schools, especially in kind of the DC metro area, you have a lot of advanced curricula depending on the school, but that looks different per school. Some schools have dual enrollment, they have AP, they have IB, they have their own honors level program, they have a mixture of all the above. Some have their own crafted type of curricula that is kind of comparable to kind of college level work. So our jobs are really trying to best understand the concept of that respective school. And as an applicant from that school, how are you maximizing what is available to you? So if dual enrollment is kind of like the top level per se of the curricula at your school and seen as the most rigorous curriculum, then that's going to be a benefit to you. Because my automatic assumption, at least hope, is that you are challenging yourself as much as you possibly can. Within reason. And I say that to say not to the point where you're sacrificing grades and you're being negatively impacted. But for most of the students applying, if you are challenging yourself to as much as you can, then that's going to be a benefit. So a lot of times we're looking at, again, what is a curricula? A lot of times we'll look at from school profiles. A lot of us who are working contextually, I know Eric mentioned like he's read for you all in this area for like 12 years. So he's very experienced in understanding the schools and the context of the DMV per se and all of the various schools. So he understands what he is what he's accustomed to seeing per se at that respective school. Same for myself. And so that is key with dual enrollment. So if that is seen as a high level curricula at your school and you're taking advantage of it, go for it. That's very positive. But again, don't think that depending on the school, some schools may say, well, hey, our AP curriculum is at the same level of rigor as the dual enrollment classes. And then therefore I'm going to give the AP the same level of weight per se and looking at the level of rigor because that's the key. So again, that's again looking at context. Now, I will say if you're looking for credit, and that's a whole other conversation, and each of us is very different on that. I think I have a lot of students who are looking for credit when they come to us. We are very liberal, I think, in giving credit. That's a benefit once you matriculate per se to, let's say, a UC Berkeley, where depending on the course being from an accredited school and the content of that course and how closely it matches what we teach on our campus, you may get some college credit. So that's an addition to the question outside of admission. You've already gotten through that door, but that's another benefit to it. Also, I will say I've had students who are very intentional about why they take what they take. And that's another part of this conversation. Depending on your school, if there's some interest in a certain area, maybe you've exhausted what your high school offers. Maybe or you just have an interest in something that's not available at your school and you have the opportunity to take a course, a dual enrollment course at a local university, community college, or whatever that may be, that's another part of it. To me, that's also a benefit because that means you've gone above and beyond even what's available at your school to say, I'm taking this course and I need it, and this is why. And so there's it's an intention behind it. There's a thought process as to why you're taking the course. So that's a long response, but I always feel like there are different parts of taking dual enrollment courses, but it all still goes back to the context of your respective school, what's available, and are you maximizing it? And please talk to your counselors. That is key. They're the ones who will help you through that process and help you in understanding and picking the right courses for you year by year. So that's another key piece of that.
Okay, I can't remember. Okay, so Chicago, your test optional still. Cornell, are you? No, okay, so this would, I guess, only go to U Chicago because the rest of you and your test blind you us. So Will, because it's all skewed now because only kids that had really strong scores were submitting. So if you go to the median, it's like 1,500 now. So
Yeah.
when should a kid submit their test scores to U Chicago?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think the first mindset to put yourself in any school that's test optional is, am I putting a better foot forward with just my transcript, or am I putting a better foot forward with my transcript plus my test score? Like if you're thinking about what your academic capabilities are, and you can talk to your counselors if you need to understand, maybe what the scores you have in each of those areas is kind of showing for you. But first try to come to this personal decision of does the test score support or improve what I know I'm capable capable of academically in the classroom? Or is this classroom success like, that's where I'm best, I'm not the best test taker, I just didn't have good test days, so my transcript is going to be how I put my foot forward. So that's one way to think about it. And again, I think sort of the place to start. For applying to U Chicago, we're not just test optional. We have this kind of unique or newer and certainly not common policy called no harm testing that a few other schools have, where including being test optional, if you do choose to send us a test score, we will only factor it into the admission review if it benefits your application. And the benefit of a score can be very contextual, right? Like a student from rural West Virginia, we might have sort of different testing like expectations or testing context than a student from Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. And so I know that that can be hard to predict necessarily. And so that's part of why we went to this no harm model, was so that you can truly confidently send us any test score if you feel, I would say if you feel like it's within the realm of your academic abilities, like it wasn't a total bomb test score, like it was a crazy off day, but you're like, this was a pretty good score, maybe not quite as high as I wanted, or maybe it is a great score anyway. You can know and confidently know that you send it to us and we'll only include it in that kind of contextual review if it benefits your application. So the short answer is just send us your test scores, even though we are test optional at U Chicago. But I know there's a lot of other test optional schools that, and exactly like Kate said, medians get skewed really high. Medians in middle 50s get skewed really high in test optional environments because students get sort of perversely incentivized not to submit strong, but not quite like over the median scores, like those 1480s, those 1490s that are fantastic scores, but people are like, that's not a 1500, I can't submit it to U Chicago, which is ridiculous. But so I think, hopefully we're hoping that our medians in middle 50s kind of go down with this no harm policy in order to show like a more accurate representation of what that sort of preparation of testing might be, or what like a good score is to show preparation. But I know it's a tough question. It definitely depends on context. And I think maybe a good question to ask admissions officers at respective schools, if you have a few schools on your list that are test optional and you're trying to figure out, whether to send one or not.
Great, thank you. And we're coming up on time, so I'm just going to ask each of you if you can just quickly, I know we have the common data set, which I refer to all the time, but if each of you could just kind of the top 3 things. So obviously your transcript is number 1, I think, for all 4 of you. But if you could just tell us maybe number 2 and 3 of importance to you, like whether it's the supplementals or your activities, but just, give me your top 3 most important things you look for in an application. Go ahead, Will, you can go first because you're on my screen.
Great. Yeah, so transcript's definitely important, academic success, but that's important in the sense of showing that you're prepared. It's actually not really where we make the final decisions. Like if you have a few more B's than someone else but are a better fit, we'll probably admit you over that other person, but depending on obviously a lot of other factors. So transcript and grades are important in that kind of getting a foot through the door sense, but in terms of the making a decision sense, I would say for us, it's really the supplemental essays are where we tend to truly hone in on that sense of fit. Particularly those weird questions I mentioned at the start, like find X, where is Waldo? Those are so unique to U Chicago, and they really show us so much about your intellectual personality and fit for this kind of unique academic environment that we have here. So that I would honestly just give you my top 2 is, the academic prep to make sure we know you can succeed, and then the supplemental essays, particularly those weird questions to get our strongest sense of your fit specifically for U Chicago.
Great. Jua, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So similar to Will, definitely academic preparedness, level of academic excellence. We're a little different where you do self-report your information in the UC application. So also be mindful of that, just so that you understand how to navigate that process. So academic preparedness, excellence, definitely extracurricular activities / leadership. All of that's kind of tied in together. That's extremely important in our process. And then finally, definitely our personal insight questions. You have 8 to choose from. You have to answer 4 out of the 8. You have variety. Please pick wisely. Have some fun. All the wonderful things we've told you about, filling them out. But those are really, really helpful, again, in really understanding, and say the term again, the context. I find a lot of that is extremely helpful in students, how they respond to the PIQ responses, gives us a lot more information to work with. In addition to, I agree with Will, most of our applicants academically are prepared. They're good. But what other things are you going to bring to the campus, again, to be a part of our community and how you're going to contribute? So academic, extracurriculars, and then the PIQ responses.
Thank you. Eric, thank you so much. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo those supplemental questions. I also will say, and this is like a little bit of a change, but it addresses one of the other questions that had come up. There's this like myth of the well-rounded student where you have to be good at everything, and that is the way that you're admitted to college. I've never met like the perfect well-rounded student who's good at everything. If you're good at everything, why are you going to college? You're done. We are going to admit students who have strengths and weaknesses, which means there are going to be parts of the application where for that specific student, this piece of the application is the most important part. That could be their artistic prowess. They might be an incredible oboist, and that's really important. And the orchestra needs an oboe at Dartmouth that year, and that means that it's going to happen. For another student, it might be that they're a really powerful writer. So those essays are really the most important pieces. Or a student is the next great nuclear physicist, and for that reason, what they're telling us in their research is the most important piece of their application. We are going to admit a student in our class who has strengths where your weaknesses are and weaknesses where your strengths are. And when we talk about building the class, to Kristen's point, we're talking about building a well-rounded class to fill out all these different spots on campus. Again, that does not mean you need to know exactly what you want to do. It's our job to kind of think about things in a more fluid way. But for you, in your application specifically, there might be one area that is going to be the most important thing when we're thinking about filling a seat on our campus. But for the person sitting next to you, it may have been a different element of their application. So thinking about kind of your strengths and putting those forward as best you can.
Thank you. And Kristen?
Sure. To round out, I think I would just draw back to that most of us do practice holistic admissions, which means that there is no single part of the application that is most important. But what I can tell you is that the order that I often look at it is the transcript first, followed by those writing supplements, because I want to find out whether or not I think this student shows a fit for Cornell. And then I use the rest of the application to really round out my understanding of them as an individual. And so each of the pieces is important, but maybe when I review them changes a little bit to me in a level of kind of when I look at it and when I start to form my opinion.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I know I'm always learning more and more and more every time I have one of these. So I appreciate your time. I hope you all stay cool because it's very hot here. Thank you so much. And to all the students and parents who joined today, this will be shared with your college and career advisor in your high school. If you don't know who that is, ask your counselor. And thank you all so much for being here today.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.